Good morning. It's Friday, Friday, Friday. And I'm
Oh,
Jill, and that's
I'm Deb.
Deb, and she's
Hi.
tired, but I'm not because this is my fourth cup of coffee.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've had a
Yeah,
lot of coffee. Our Canadian guests came last night, so we have their uh, trailer, their motorhome in our garage, not in our garage, but our driveway.
nice.
And they've got a dog, and I learned the trick, Jill. If you want a dog to love you, even if it's skittish, give it bacon.
Or
So,
cheese. Either one
or
works.
cheese, right. So
Mhm.
and he followed me right around. And then our cat is used to him, sort of followed him around. And I
That's
just love
nice.
when animals get along better than people.
Oh,
So there
it's
you go.
delightful, and they can show people how to get along. That's part of the reason for pets teach us
Bacon.
everything, and they teach us how to get along, and they teach us to enjoy food, and they teach us how to grieve. They teach us all the things,
They
right?
teach us all the things.
Yes.
So you were just talking before we got on about a book. What's this
I
book?
was just we just got a message from Stacy's cousin who we went to see when we were up north this last couple of months, and I noticed that she had one of my favorite books. It's actually now a series about Homer the Black Cat. And Homer not only was a rescue cat, he was a black blind rescue cat. And the woman who adopted him had just lost her beloved, precious baby. And we all know what that's like. And the vet kept telling her he had a cat that had been dumped and this was going to be her cat. And she kept saying, I'm not ready. I need to finish grieving. And that's one of the things about pet loss. Sometimes the way you finish the grieving is to bring someone home and put that love that's missing a spot, never
Mm-hmm.
missing a spot at our house, as you can tell,
Uh-huh.
missing a spot into somebody else who needs you, which is my personal belief. I think that
Mm-hmm.
when they have left this earth, they leave with the hope that we're going to give that to somebody else.
Right.
Um, and so Homer was waiting at the vet's office, and Homer was blind, and she lived in New York City. And she brought Homer home, although she was really worried about how to deal with a blind animal, which is something we do. And the vet told her the same rules that we all use, which is orient them. Don't move the furniture after you've oriented them. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you keep an eye on them. Don't put things in their way that'll be dangerous, and they'll figure it out. And they have amazing noses, which is perfect for helping one figure things out, right? And
Right.
so she one night her apartment was broken into while she was asleep, and Homer was on her high boy sleeping in her bedroom, very tall dresser. For those who don't know what that is, and there's this thing about blind cats. They don't need to see someone in the dark. They
Mm-hmm.
can sense them. So this guy landed on her bed and Homer landed on him. And there's nothing like a cat scratch and a cat bite to get you moving. And so he went screaming out of the apartment, and Homer rode him all the way out to the street. And then, of course, there was the fear of Homer being lost in the city. And the neighbors all banded together and brought Homer home. And she and Homer then have a whole series of adventures. And they're all real. She wrote books about him and about the joy that can come from having a beloved pet who was also a special needs pet who gives you a place to put the love that didn't have any place to go.
Wow.
I
That's a
love that book.
beautiful story.
Isn't that a
Is it
great story?
is it a thin book, like a children's book, or it's like a little novelish?
It's about the size of like the last lecture,
Okay, got it.
right? That sort of thing. Hey Steve, it's nice to have you here. So we it's and at the same size as I'm looking at a couple of other grief books, the ones that are, maybe an inch thick, but
Yeah.
it's not a very long book. None of the books are, but they certainly tell amazing stories. It's one that I gift to people sometimes when they've been a few months out from loss of a pet,
Mm-hmm.
or when I'm
Mm-hmm.
struggling for a Christmas present or Hanukkah present or something, and I need something that just reaches someone's soul. Homer
Yes.
always does.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look into that. And
Homer is a true cool kid, or he was. He's not. He's died now. He had a
yeah.
very long life with his mom.
Do you remember the author's name?
I do not, but if you put Homer the Black Blind Cat in a search engine, you will find tons of stuff.
Perfect. Thank you.
It's
I,
like putting in Beyonce the Big Metal Chicken. It'll come up immediately.
you know, yeah. Oh, I don't know that one, that video.
That's a
Now I'm gonna,
throwdown. That's a column, and you have to read it too.
oh, okay. Um, you know, I like what you said when you need to give something to someone that is, it touches their soul. And for those people around and those that are listening and those that will be listening via our podcast or right here, you know, sometimes not giving a book about people grief, but about pet loss helps people grief.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when, or recommending a movie that has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with someone dying per se or a pet dying, but maybe it is about loss. Like I would recommend that movie If.
Mm-hmm.
We watched it. Many people know I talked about my camp box and my friend from camp that had just died. And before I went, what did I do? I went and I looked online and got the movie If, and it's all about not um, about letting go of imaginary friends, and
Mm-hmm.
then and we do, and I'll talk about another movie that you and
Which
I
is
were talking.
another loss. Yes.
Yeah, and then letting that imaginary friend, or at least recognizing how important at that time the imaginary friend is. So it, talking about grief, or if a friend dies or their partner dies or their or someone in their family dies, don't rush to fix it.
Because you can't.
You can't.
Breathe, folks. You can't fix loss. You can companion it.
Yeah.
To quote Warden, you can hold the space, you can be there for someone, you can feed it.
Mm-hmm.
Because grief food is a thing,
Grief food,
right?
grief groceries. Yep.
Grief groceries, funeral potatoes, all the things.
Mm-hmm.
But you can provide things that might give someone words
Mm-hmm.
that they can eventually use, because part of the problem with grief is we aren't taught the words. Most of us, we aren't shown the words. I had another encounter with that in the last couple of weeks with a
Mm-hmm.
professional who did not feel comfortable enough to talk about afterlife care for a body, to talk about it with somebody who was sort of younger. And that's the kind of stuff we need to be able to do. But we have to give people words and permission and make it okay to say, I have big feelings and I don't know what to do with them, but I want to share them.
You know, I was just talking about something and realizing more things after my dad died. And I was 14. Weren't you young when a parent died also? Were
Grandparents.
you young?
No, my
Grandparents.
dad, I was already a parent when he died.
So it's I didn't have anybody to talk to about it.
Mm-hmm.
I felt deeply when it happened to somebody else, but I didn't have anybody. My mom, her depression was so deep.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want my brother and I just spoke about this, okay? And he's in his early 60s, I'm in my later 60s. And he said to me after dad died, did I ever get sort of wiggy or scared or something when mom would take her long trips? Like maybe she'd go to Israel, or maybe we'd go here, or she'd, go out to California or wherever she traveled. Did you ever get like nervous or anxious? And I thought about it. I was at college when mom started traveling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I go, I did. I worried if she was going to come back. It's like we never talked about the loss for like 4 years. And then mom would felt comfortable leaving my brother home alone when he was
Mm-hmm.
like, a sophomore, junior, or senior in high school. She'd go away for a couple weeks, and my brother and I both would get like, what if she doesn't come back?
Right.
And that's because we never got to talk about
Dad
dad.
not going to get back.
And
Yeah.
my mom actually said to my 9-year-old brother back then, oh, why don't we just think of dad being gone, like on a long hunting trip? That was the best she could do.
Right. Because she didn't have words.
Right. Right.
Right.
And I just want to make this suggestion because, every generation, there's people that can't talk about something, right?
Right.
My nephew, turns out he's very much like my mother as far as you don't talk about body functions. And I don't mean just potty humor. Like you can't even really say lub dub, like as if you're imitating the heart. It just makes him sick inside. It's just one of those things.
There are
So
people like that.
there are. And so not being able to talk about um, your own death as a boomer to your kids,
Mm-hmm.
folks. Oh, wait. I just said the word folks. I was listening to Rush Limbaugh-esque radio show, show yesterday, and they say,
Mm-hmm.
I just get sick when people say folks, because they were talking about the Obamas when they
Aw.
or whatever. Anyway, folks, I am saying when a doctor has to talk about hard stuff with their client, their patient, you take a breath. You don't have to preempt it with this is hard. You could, but usually if someone says this is hard, they're going to shut down right away. So
Right.
you take a breath, maybe you write out 2 or 3 sentences. I need to talk to you about our wills and our death.
Mm-hmm. And what I want done after my death.
And this is what I want done. And I want
Mm-hmm.
you all to hear it. So you're all on the same page if you have siblings. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll write it down for you. It's
And this is
hard.
who's in charge to make decisions. And this is why. And I don't want fighting.
Well, I don't want fighting. I can't help it if you do. I'm
Right.
going.
But I'm throwing down the gauntlet now.
Yeah, yeah.
Figure it out.
That's right. That's right. And here's what you're going to do. And, just taking a breath and say the hard sentence.
Mhm.
In a prosperity class, when they talk about tithing, and it was a course by Stretton Smith. And what Stretton Smith always said was, swallow the big frog first. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So do the hard thing first. Write it out if you have to. Um, but if you don't want to just like spring it on anybody, you can say, I watched Old Yeller the other day and the dog died and I was really sad. Have you guys ever seen Old Yeller? Well, speaking of death, but
Let's talk about mine.
what? Say
And then
again.
speaking of death, I want to talk about mine,
And I want to
right?
talk about mine. And they're going to
And
be
I want you to know what I want done, and I want you to know why,
yeah.
right? And these are the documents, and these are where they're stored.
Yeah, here's the list. Here's
And
who's in charge.
as new people come into the family, new generations get added, we're going to have the conversation again
Yep. Yep.
because we have to talk about it.
Yeah. And just because you're afraid doesn't mean I'm afraid.
And doesn't mean other people should learn to be afraid.
You
And
know,
that's where Homer's book comes in. And
yes.
that's where all the other books come in that we can read, and the movies that we can watch, so that we can have the words, so we can open the conversations.
Jill, you have 2 or 3 books. One talking about pet loss, right? Did you
Mhm.
write a pet loss book?
I wrote a pet loss book called My Pet is Sick, What Happens Now?
Yeah.
And then I have the children's books, Somebody I Love is Sick, It's Time to Say Goodbye, and Somebody I Love Just Died, What Happens Now? And they're children's books. They're illustrated. I had a nice illustrator. Um, but and they've got help in the back for grown-ups, but they tell it
Mhm.
like it is. Because we
Absolutely.
need to do that with kiddos, and that's how as adults we learn. I've had adults read those books and say nobody said this to me.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. I have for my grief group, I have a teen book that it's for teens, like a workbook, but I
Mhm.
apply it to the adults.
Mhm.
Let's talk about, it's like, what shall we talk about this week? Or what's on your heart this week? That's where I usually start, which leads to. I have a book out called
You do,
Grandma
and I
D's.
love that book. Grandma
It's
D's Bubbles.
and it's all about, in a very non-religious way, talking about using a bubble as a metaphor, as what people look like when they're dying. You have very vibrant colors, and then it gets grayer and grayer, and then it pops, and the bubble's gone. But you always wonder what's left from the bubble. Well, what was in it was air and love, because you love to blow bubbles. And you know
Mhm.
what? That air and love you can use once that bubble pops to blow other bubbles. And it's a cycle, and it's okay to be sad and happy that
At
you
the
get to
same
blow
time.
bubbles, but you're sad that they popped. Same thing
Mhm.
with people, they popped. So,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
Steve's even talking about using your books, referencing them in our grief group. And Steve, I need your address so I can send you a book.
I
Send you
have
the
one.
line.
I'll drop it off for him.
Great, great. Is
I
it
will
the
drop one
newer
off.
one? If it's URL
Probably
link,
not.
okay. I'm gonna send you a few of
Okay.
books. Yeah, so
He
I'll
says
just
yes,
send
yes,
you
yes.
books. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. of
You
the
know,
newer.
I've been known when I've been working with adults, like when I would do a once a month check-in with our hospice crew,
Mhm.
um, I would read Love You Forever or The
Oh,
Invisible
yeah.
String, and now we've got The Invisible Leash. They don't talk about death so much, but the emotional impact and the release that they offer
Mhm.
is just incredible. It's truly freeing, and they try to buck up, and I'm not gonna respond. Yeah, you are. You're gonna respond to it.
Mhm.
'Cause even if you didn't have a mom who would stalk you and break into your house at 2 in the morning and crawl up a ladder and break into your and, you had somebody in your life that you've lost,
Mhm.
or you've had a patient that you've lost, right?
Yeah.
I've been reading papers from my class from Marian University this week. I'm doing a finishing up a thanatology class for first responders, and the papers have been really exceptional. And several of them are nurses, and I talk about you when I do live classes with them, and they've
Mhm.
all referenced the losses that nurses experience on an ongoing basis but can't share anywhere.
Right.
And so they're actually creating their capstone projects to acknowledge trauma in nursing care and grief in nursing care, which is hugely important.
Yeah. I- I often talk about how weird it was to come to work, clock in, put a body on the cart, but I was just talking to that body before my week break. You know what I mean? Like
That body
my
was a living
weekend
person
off.
before you left. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, I was just talking to them, and now I'm putting their body, and then I put another body, but a call light's going off, and it's an alive patient, so I have to switch right away. And there's this, and so sometimes you don't, it sort of sneaks up on you, the
Mhm.
accumulation of losses, and you don't realize all the compartments you've had to put your feelings in, and
Mhm.
then you don't. I remember a particularly hard day when I worked at public health. And this wasn't a loss about death, but it was hearing people's different types of losses.
The
Maybe
stories.
they were a sex worker and they were
Mhm.
beaten, so it's loss of identity. Maybe it's loss of a marriage because of an affair. I was working what do we call it? Sexual disease,
Mhm.
STI, sexual
Mhm.
transmission of disease, whatever. And um, and so I was doing a counseling part, and I came home one day and I said to Daryl, "Are you having an affair?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "Okay, if you're not having an affair with a woman, are you having an affair with a man?" What? Okay, have you beat anybody that I don't know about? Maybe with a coat hanger, a hot coat hanger. Have you ever caused scarring like that? He goes, what? And then I said, so you're not going to leave me. You're not going to frequent men's bathrooms or anything like that. Oh, this is from, thank you. Thank you, Kane. He finally, Daryl said, did you have a bad day at work? Was it a hard day? And
You said, "What makes you think that, honey?"
I'm like, you could say that. It was just so, it was like one story after another, but it was like all these, I felt the pain of everybody, and I had
Mhm.
to keep just sticking it into a place in my head, and
And you had to download it.
yeah, I had to download it in a tolerable way. Kane here, um, uh, I'm a chosen aunt, and
Oh, I wondered why I didn't know that name.
yeah, yeah, I'm a chosen aunt. In fact, his mom is here in the driveway. She's a social worker talking to her clients. Those are our Canadian friends. And, I've talked to Kane many times. And, sometimes you just have to process all those losses, just like almost vomit them out.
Yeah, one of the people in the class one of the nurses is actually a NICU nurse. And she's L&D, labor and delivery.
Yes.
And she said, and everyone assumes that it's all sweetness and light. And you have no idea how stressful it is and how you have to write every note as if you're going to be sued.
That's
and
right.
how many times bad things happen. We're understaffed, overwhelmed, and childbirth is not a guaranteed safe. And I said, boy, do I know that, having almost lost a child during that. So
Yes.
when my own daughter was delivering, and for her, there's that loss of, oh, I went into this because I wanted all the happy, and now I'm on the defensive 24/7, and we do lose.
Yes.
We do have to go from helping a mom say goodbye to an infant that didn't survive to going to the next room and celebrating a happy birth. And it's that same sense that you had on your unit then, working public health. And the same thing in hospice when I was on the road, and I would sit with the family at the end of life, and we'd say a good goodbye, and we'd, wrap things up, and hugs and kisses for everybody, and then go on to the next family who were brand new to hospice. And I had to back up a little bit. And okay, now let's find out how much you know about end of life and figure out how we're going to do education for you and how well you're going to absorb it. Right? It's all of that.
I have started using palliative care as an adjective and a metaphor, an adjective and metaphor for, let's say someone's leaving a job, but they haven't quite given in their notice.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you need to just, you're not dead or DOA, but you need something in between, right? Just to make it more tolerable. And then when you're leaving a job or leaving someplace, that's hospice until the moment you've left, right? So you just have to be comfortable. And working these two words into everyday vocabulary as metaphors. One, you have to understand the metaphor and the etiology. And two, start using it. It will make you more comfortable with death. The more you use something, it's sort of like when I first started using computers, right? Or anybody. But as a boomer, I'm like, dear God, I know if I touch this, it's going to explode and break, right? Or on my phone, I'm going to just screw up everything. And now I'm a two-fisted typer.
Oh, you are.
I am. Texting and stuff like that. Now, putting things into folders and stuff like that, I'm still not good at that. However, the more you use something, and that means words, hard words that mean a lot of different things to people, the more you say it, the more you explore it, you let that tension out so you could start working and make strides toward a solution. My daughter came up with something yesterday. She said something, or maybe a couple days ago, and she said, solutions, not stress. And
absolutely.
And even though something might die or is getting ready to die, or eventually it's going to happen, once you start using words when that stress comes up about the thought of the loss or this, think of what's the solution? What is something I can do?
How do I cope?
How do I cope? Even though it hasn't happened, what are some things I might do to cope? What would I do this all the time to people. So if I was in your situation, what would you tell me? What would be a
Mhm.
healthy thing to tell me? And then they start going and they go, oh, like, oh. And I said, and it is so hard to take your own medicine.
It is, isn't it?
It is.
But
You
it's also if they think about what they have heard from you or from others or observed others doing,
know. Mm-hmm.
eventually they'll get there. I frequently have clients say, I try to think WWJD.
Uh-huh.
What would Jill do?
What would you
And
do?
what would Jill do? And if it's something as simple as picking up some paper and some colored pencils and just clearing their head,
Mm-hmm.
or writing in a journal, which nobody wants to do.
Isn't that
Uh,
interesting?
and
Yeah.
therapists don't want to do it either, but we all know it's good for us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Or have a conversation with someone,
Mm-hmm.
or play some music,
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
some breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Deb would meditate. Jill would say, listen to guided imagery, because Jill doesn't meditate well because her brain doesn't shut down well. Have a cup of something hot or something cold, depending on the temperature outside.
Sheldon from watching Young Sheldon and Big Bang Theory, in Young Sheldon, his mother said, he said, what should I do with this girl that's coming over? Well, when someone's having a problem and wants to talk, offer them a hot beverage. So adult Sheldon in Big Bang Theory, even if it didn't seem like it was appropriate, and like Penny is just like spewing,
Right.
he'd say, may I offer you a hot beverage?
Right.
Just like that. Like, it was a horrible day at work. May I offer you a hot beverage? It's like it gives you something to do and you don't feel lost. And sometimes
Mhm.
it's okay to split yourself and go, may I offer myself a hot beverage?
And that is where tea time and fika in the afternoon
Oh,
give you that space to offer yourself a little bit of a head break, clear the head, have a little
absolutely.
nourishment, have a little something warm, and then finish out your day in a better place.
Maybe
And
you
having
need
left behind the first half of the day at the
yes,
fika or the tea table.
that's right. Isn't there's a story about there's a tree planted outside someone's house, this gentleman who has a stressful job, maybe he's a firefighter or police officer, and I touch the tree and leave all, it's a symbolic gesture.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
touch the tree and leave it all at the tree so I can go in and just be with my kids and my wife.
mhm. Which
And
is something that everybody that I interviewed for my course said they all found a way to clear their heads on the way home. All the
yes,
people who are on the front lines, because they didn't want to bring it into the house. It felt
that's
toxic
right.
to them. No
Right.
matter what happened, it stayed outside because that was their way of coping and their way of protecting their family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And but in terms of grief, when we are having grief inside our homes, we need to find the words. Now, Deb and I will share that we are going to put together a presentation for next year for the International Death, Grief, and Bereavement Conference on the use of media, particularly movies and TV, to present and learn how to find the language and how to do grief. So
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be talking grief movies, folks. If you have some you want us to talk about, send them in, post them up. We'll be doing it.
Please,
And then
please.
fair warning, Jill's going to be working on a genealogy program for grief and loss. So send that in too. What have you found out about your family and what they coped with
Yeah, how did they
recently
talk?
or 300 years ago?
Who talked about it? Who doesn't?
Right.
And like telephone, how did the story get changed?
Where did it go?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be coming up next week. Deb will be putting out Mr. Holland's Opus. There you go,
Yes.
Miss
Oh my
Melissa.
gosh.
Add that to the list, Deb.
Thank you.
We will be back on next Friday. Deb will be setting it up and putting it out. I will be joining from Berkeley because my beloved nephew is getting married. So I will be joining in
Yay.
from Berkeley. And we will be starting some of those conversations because, you know, we got to get the presentation proposals in and we want to hear what you folks have found to be helpful. And Mr.
Yeah.
Holland's Opus, oh my gosh, that was
It's so good.
disabilities.
Oh,
That was so many things.
oh,
Right?
oh, oh. So many losses in so many different ways. I have goosebumps just thinking about it. Great
All
one.
right.
Thanks, Melissa. We miss you too.
Excellent.
Hope to see you at the conference.
Melissa, put Wisconsin on your calendar for next year.
Yeah.
All right. So we will see all of you next week, 10 o'clock Pacific time, all the other time blocks all around the world. And we will be back next week. Have a great weekend. Deb?
Be well. Take some time for yourself. Drink some water.
Absolutely.
May I
And
offer
have
you a
hot
hot beverage?
beverage.
Oh.